84% of people in our region consider themselves Christians. That means the church is everywhere, in our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, government, healthcare systems, and more. Together, we have the power to transform our community so that everyone can flourish. But sometimes it's hard to see what role we can play and what difference we can make. So you're about to hear a story, and it's about an ordinary person helping our city flourish by integrating their faith into their everyday life. This is a story of the church beyond the pew.
All right, welcome back to the For Evansville podcast. I'm Sarah. I'm part of the team here at For Evansville, and I'm hanging out with someone I've just recently gotten to know a little bit more and keep running into you in different places now, Brian Fleming. Brian, tell us, I guess, a little bit about yourself. But first of all, thanks for being here, and thanks for joining us as we continue this series of Stories Beyond the Pew, thinking of just life as a person of Jesus outside of the walls of a traditional or church in that way. So tell us a little bit about you before we get started, though.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and it was fun having our initial conversation. And so Brian Fleming, I'm married. My wife is Chris. We have 5 kids together, 3 boys, 2 girls, all married, 8 grandkids so far. And I've been in, I guess, the printing industry my entire life. And so I still am on the sales side. And so, been in the corporate world, been a Christian since probably right around 1983, that time frame, raised Catholic.
Okay.
Prior to that, but was pretty disengaged kid.
Okay. Did you do Catholic school or just kind of raised Catholic church?
No, yeah, just raised in a Catholic church, was an altar boy, all that kind of stuff. But it was in Ohio, in middle part of Ohio, and so it wasn't a really heavily Catholic area, unlike Evansville is, which is interesting for me to see. It was more of a Protestant area.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this conversation really happened because we were talking after a church service just a few weeks ago, and just asking you a little bit more about your job, and you were telling me that I think the quote that you said to me were like spurred in my head of like, we have to tell Adrian to get this on the podcast. You said, I used to always think I need to work for a nonprofit because that's where the spiritual people are.
Yeah.
But then you realized, actually, I want to be one of the spiritual people just in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Can you tell me just about that? Like, how did that come about to you? And maybe we need a little bit of backstory of why you thought the spiritual people themselves were only in nonprofit or maybe specifically traditional church jobs.
Yeah. So when I think about, early spiritual life, growing up in the Catholic Church, there was a distinct separation between lay people and clergy, right? You had priests, nuns, they dressed different. Everything was different about how they lived their life than me. And so then once I became a Christian and started going to Protestant churches, modern evangelical style churches, then I'm kind of looking for frames of reference that are similar. Mm-hmm. And you could see people that were clergy, right, the staff, things like that, and people that were lay people. And you'd see leaders in the church, and you'd say, what's the difference, right? What's the difference between these people? And I really started to view it as, well, they went to seminary, so it was all this knowledge, and the people with the knowledge, the more you have, you're more likely to be in charge, or you're more spiritual. I guess I equated those two things, right? Knowledge and spirituality. If you know and can quote all these Bible verses and and do your sword drills and find your verses, then you're more spiritual. And so that's what I wanted. And I admired a lot of these people. They meant a lot to me, as a new believer. I'm trying to learn how to walk, trying to learn how to be a Christian, and this is where I'm going from my source, and they're telling me how to do it. And so, that was a big part of it, is seeing that and saying, okay, how do I get in on that side of it? Because I want to be one of those leader people that I admire so much,
Yeah, and so you see that, and I mean, and maybe no one has specifically said that. Why do you think we think that? Because I think, I believe the same thing, especially growing up, and I've shared this on the podcast, but maybe if you're listening now, you haven't listened to that episode before, but I worked for a church for 6 years and kind of Love that experience and really glad I was a part of it and learned a lot and still attend to that church for the most part. And it's one of those where I'm like, somewhere along the lines, I probably thought the same thing. Like the people that, were in leadership at the church or maybe even a nonprofit of some places we worked, those were the people that were the real spiritual people. Mm-hmm. Why do we think that way?
Gosh, because we allow that input, right? I guess I think a part of discipleship, right, is submitting yourself to someone else's authority. To say, you're my mentor. I'm going to be discipled by you. And in essence, you're saying, I'll do whatever you say because I'm a dum-dum. That's what I'm saying. And so, they are in charge.
Yeah.
Right? If they tell you this is how life goes, this is what God says about whatever, it would be pretty tough to counter that and say, well, I don't quite agree with that. And so you just go on with it.
Sure. Okay, well then let's kind of take to the flip. When did that shift for you, and what was that experience like when it did really make a shift for you?
Well, so I always wanted to be like the right-hand man of the pastor. I was a music performance major, so trained musician. Vocal performance was part of it, and so every church is eager to have a song leader at the time. That's what it would have been back in my days. Song leaders, choruses are just part of it. And so at least I was up front, right? So that was a good part. And so then I really liked it. I liked doing those things because I liked music. That was part of it. But there were aspects of being at church I really liked. And so I'm constantly wanting to do more of it, and trying to really break through. I was really trying to find my way into the ministry as a layperson, and part of it was trying to figure out, what was that right equation? Because I knew of other people who did it, and so it came about. We had already had 4 of our kids. Chris is pregnant with the 5th because they're all 2 years apart, so it's pretty quick. And the youth pastor had left our church. And a group of guys I was with, they're like, yeah, I was already helping with youth and doing the music. And they said, we want you to come on staff. You could be the youth pastor. We'll hire you. Then you'll have your pay. And I started to do that job. And, it wasn't what I thought. And there was a church split. And it was just this epic disaster, right? And so then I'm starting to question everything about what we're doing and, is this the right thing to do? And one of the parts of it that came into play right then was financial. I had taken a significant pay cut to go into that role. Chris and I are like, well, God will provide because that's what we'll taught. It will happen. And math is math. That was a phrase we would talk about. We'd say math is math, right? It was way too much month at the end of the money. Yeah. And so we're compensating with credit cards and all this kind of stuff. And it's not like people are just jumping at the chance to bail us out. And so then we're feeling stupid because we can't manage money and live on what God is providing for us. And so it started slow with questioning little things that I believed to be true. So that would have been a fundamental one, right? And then shortly after that, we had an opportunity to move into Cleveland, and we were in Michigan prior to that. We moved into Cleveland, and we're part of a church plant, and the pastor's like, I'll train you to be a senior pastor, and I'm thinking, that's great. He said, yeah, but you got to be a tent maker. You got to go back to work. So I'm okay, I'll go to work. And work it just went great, right? I was in a great job at a great company, started to make money, started to be able to claw our way out of debt, right? And all the while doing the church plant, which that also was an epic failure. And so we're like, well, this is a disaster. And I kept seeing this again and again. Sorry, so that on the church side, I was seeing epic failures, right? In that case, it was a nervous breakdown by the senior pastor, and the next pastor in line just almost staged a coup. It was unbelievable. Oh, wow. And so we left that one, we go to the next church, and I'm in music doing stuff, but I'm still working. And work is really starting to go well now, right? I'm starting to innovate new products and do some things I never thought I would do. And, and then people have affairs. The senior pastor hung himself. I'm like, it was nuts, right?
Oh gosh, Brian.
And I'm in my corporate world, it's kind of nice, right? There's none of this insanity. There's upheaval that comes along with technology changes, people lose jobs or whatever. But it certainly wasn't that, right? And I was being fed more than in my inner being by the work side of it, by the work side of it. I was finding more life on the work side of it than I was on the church side of it. And I had to really start questioning that, right? And asking God, who am I? Because I was trying to be somebody. I was trying to force myself into a role and say, I am going to be a senior pastor. I'm going to be in the ministry. But is that who I am? Is that who God created me to be? Did I even ask? Well, he said, who will go for me? Here am I, send me. I'm supposed to answer that too. That's what spiritual people do. They say, here am I, send me. And you assume it's to the ministry instead of saying, here am I, send me into the printing industry. That just, that's counter-cultural.
Yeah.
But it rang true, right? And then it's hard to find confirmations of that being ultimately true, as opposed to what I had been taught and been learning in church all those years.
Yeah, and I think we could probably do a whole series of podcasts talking about, the unhealthy spaces that we have maybe all found ourselves in inside of institutional churches, traditional churches. And I think that obviously that is part of your story that has led to the point where you're at now. But what I'd love to really focus on kind of for the rest of our time is, what does that practically look like in the years since then? What does it look like to be a spiritual person inside of a place that may or may not be filled with other spiritual people?
Yeah.
And how does that function for you? And how does that give you life? And what are ways that you just have conversations with people that we don't have to be weird about it?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I can tell you that in the early days, it kind of looked like people are projects, and any obscure opening to maybe share the gospel should be taken. And which leaves just so much awkwardness and lack of friendship, because it's like, dude, you're not listening to me. Yeah. You're not listening. But I'll tell you about Jesus. You need Jesus. And so there was a lot of that at the beginning, but later it just became more of trying to be a friend, right? There's a couple verses that I have always been around in my mind related to my work life. One is, see a man who's skilled in what he does. He will not stand before obscure men. He will stand before kings. And because I just never knew how I would succeed. I didn't know what that looked like. I said I was a music performance major. I never finished school. I never got my degree. So I always felt like I was a little bit running behind with that one. So I would focus in on being the most excellent at what I was doing. If that was sales, then I would learn as much as possible. So back in the cassette tape days, I was always checking them out at the library and just listening, all these different concepts of selling and how people work and that kind of thing. And and then also on the just the skill set within the workplace, working on those and becoming an excellent printer and knowing everything there is to know about that. So as I learned about sales, you start to learn about people, and there are certain principles within that which are take care of them. Take care of them. You want your customer, when you walk in their office, they feel like when you leave, their desk has less stuff on it. Wow. And they wish that they could move a desk into the office for you, because that's how the relationship works. You're just making their life easier, because who wouldn't want to work with someone who makes their life easier? And that's what I'm trying to do, And so while on one hand there can be a disingenuous part of it to say, I'm going to manipulate you now, and I'm going to do all these things to ingratiate you to me, and one of them might be treating you very nicely.
Yeah.
Okay, that exists sometimes, because sometimes the people you're dealing with aren't nice, and they don't like you. So I'm just going to act that way. And another thing I would think about all the time was, be careful what you say. Be careful what you say to someone, how you treat someone, because you never know who they are or who they're becoming. They might someday become your biggest potential customer or your boss, or who knows who they're going to be. But when you thought they were an ant and you thought you'd crush them, that's going to come back to bite you someday. So while these are business principles, but they're truth principles, right? And I guess that's part of it, is just more and more you're looking for what is true in how business works and how people works, and just do that, and it works. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm curious if there's any stories you can share of, because I think a lot of people, you've touched on so many really important things. One, that kind of searching for meaning and purpose in your career, and thinking the only way you're going to find meaning and purpose in your career is if you worked in a specific place, and realizing, actually, God has sent me to this place. Yeah. And it's where, in the roles that you've been in now. And yet you are a person of faith in that space as well. That is a true statement.
Yeah, yeah.
What is that? Are there any stories of being able, and obviously I think that you said that early on you thought, I had to take every opportunity to share.
Yeah, I thought that's what it meant, right? And I think over time it became more, if you offer a cup of water to someone in my name, then, that you're doing unto me. And it became caring about the people that I work with. So one thing I could think about recently, I work for a global company, so I'm on calls with people from other regions of the world. And I was on a call one day with a colleague of mine out of Turkey, and I've never met her. We've had a lot of conference calls together, been on a team together for about 2 years, and it was just two of us. And she starts talking about her previous role in a job, different company. And I'm just flabbergasted. I'm like, how could I have not known that? I said, you have so many valuable skills to bring to this team, to this table for our company, and it's like we're just ignoring you over there. And she just said, Brian, you just please stop. I'm going to cry. Because she was heard. I heard her, and it's a little thing, but I don't know what else, how many other times I'll interact with her, So, and then if it's only on a conference call, and if it's only she gets heard that much, I know that's what Christ would have me do, in her life.
Yeah.
So that was a recent instance. It was, whew.
I think that's really good, because it's obviously it's real and honest, and it's practical. It's seeing people in whatever space that you're in, if that's a marketplace, if it's, in a home, if it's in a ministry, like all of those are opportunities for that. But seeing that opportunity is in every space that you're in, to just see people, listen to them, get to know them. I love the analogy you said of when they leave, that they have a little bit less on their desk, like kind of thing, like a little bit less weights because they've been able to interact with you and you're able to bring that part of yourself with you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess maybe as we kind of wrap up conversation a little bit, because we try to keep these episodes a little bit shorter. You talked a little bit about God's provision, sort of at the beginning as we were talking about that, and thinking you took a role and thinking God will provide. Obviously, maybe you've seen some things. How have you seen that provision? And it doesn't have to be financial. Like, how's God's provision shown up through the roles that you've taken in that way for you?
So when I came down to Evansville in started in 2013, working here, and as part of the requirement, I had 2 years to bring my family here. My youngest was going to be a senior in high school. And oh my gosh, we'd raised our kids in the same neighborhood our whole lives.
Wow.
And so now we're moving. And I heard, no way, I ain't moving. This wasn't the youngest one, it was another one. and I'm not coming home for summers for college. I'm going to go stay with my friends up here. And when I get married, it's going to be up here. And you guys are just going to have to travel, And I'm like, oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? And so fast forward now to just what's unforeseen, right? That we ended up buying some property out in the St. Phillips area here. And there was a house on it. There were a whole series of events that kind of led us to this property. And I ended up remodeling the house that's there, and I sold that to my oldest daughter and her husband and their 5 kids. And so they live on a parcel of land there. And we're like offering to the other kids, hey, do you want a parcel? Do you want to move out here? Yeah. My other daughter, the one that said, no way, never, I'm going to stay in Cleveland. Yeah, we will. So they buy a parcel and build a house.
Oh, wow.
And so now I have 7 grandkids within walking distance, right? And Chris and I, my wife Chris and I, were walking one day, and we were talking about, let's stand before King's verse, and what is success, what is that? And she's like, you're the richest guy in the world, right? Because you have this right here at your fingertips. It's not, and they want to be around you, right? I had to tell my daughters, I said, you can't just let the kids, because I work from home, you can't just let them knock on my door and say, Poppy, do you want to play? Because I cannot say no 4 times a day. Right. I said, you need to text me and say, can they stop by or whatever, and I can let you know what's actually happening. But it was just too brutal to do that every day. But I get to do that every day, and they want to come over all the time. And yeah, that's God's blessing poured out, right? And really confirmation that I'm on the path He wants me on, doing what He wants me to do, that my spiritual life is between Him and me. And I need people, but He said the Holy Spirit is your teacher. And so that's the connection that I seek after, is that deeper spiritual life with Him, and then He directs me into the things I need to do. They might be within a formal, institutionalized church setting. They might be out in the marketplace. They might be in the neighborhood. Who knows what they are? That's up to Him. But that's what has to be fostered within me, is that intimacy, so.
That's great. I think that for me, even just listening, I'm like, wow, like to think of the decisions that are made at one point in your life and following that and seeing the provision years later is always so beautiful to be able to see how God's blessing has been poured out in that way. I guess maybe one more question. No. As we think about this, if you're talking to somebody who's kind of in a similar situation, if they're wondering like, I don't know, I think I have to do this or have to do that, or if they are in a job where like, hey, I'm a person of faith and I'm just in a marketplace job, but I don't really know how to do that. I think you've given them some really good practical ways to just be themselves and also bring God with them in that. Any advice or any things that you would say to people in that?
Well, I think, anytime we're at a place where we're thinking hard about, do I do this or do I do that, right? That's our opportunity. More than deciding a career, it's an opportunity for more intimacy with God, to go deeper into yourself, and for the questions to be asked inside you. Why do you think you're wanting to do this?
Yeah.
Are you running? Maybe God knows you have a tendency to run. It's hard, get a new job, right? And jobs at church are much better because people are nicer, right? I mean, that's
sometimes
right. And so I would say, contemplate what it is you do and recognize that there's vast benefit to humanity around you if you work at a bank or if you work construction or whatever it is, right? You are doing things that are wonderful for people. I mean, now if you're, in the mafia, maybe question it. Maybe I'm not doing good things. But most people are doing really good things that need to be done, and they are just as spiritual as preaching a sermon, right? Just do what you got to do your job. It's equally important. Doesn't get all the credit, but gosh, we need you to do it.
That's so good. I think that's a great place for us to end. And I'll just say, in the handful of times I've got to visit the ministry that you and Chris are a part of and some other friends, I have been so blessed. It's been so refreshing for me to just get to be there and be a part of that and take part in that. So thank you guys for leading in that. And I just am really excited to continue to see where it goes.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
You just heard a story of the church beyond the pew. At Fort Evansville, we believe that the church has the power to transform our community, but it doesn't always show up where and how it should. That's why we're on a mission to help Christians and churches discover the role that they can play in addressing our city's greatest needs. Are you passionate about seeing the church bring God's peace and justice throughout our city? If so, I want to invite you to join the Fort Evansville Collective, a community of people who are passionate about being the church beyond the pew and helping others to do the same. You can support Fort Evansville's mission and gain exclusive access to resources that will help you love our city well. Visit fortevansville.org/collective to learn more.